From the bookshelf to the big screen, we have all heard of Marvel. This multi-billion-dollar company rules your local cinemas, but it hasn't always been this way. Today, we will discuss how Marvel went from the brink of failure to fortune. It's the 1990s. Marvel Comics dominate the shop fronts with hundreds of different stories to read. Sales were rising exponentially, and comic book stores were surfacing more and more. Fans brought more comics, knowing that what they were purchasing had a large future ahead of it. Marvel dominated the comic industry so hard that their comics became investments. Collectors started buying comics for the future, with many owning multiple copies of the same story but with different covers. These ranged from foil covers all the way to glow-in-the-dark ink. These felt exclusive and were labelled as rare by Marvel. Comic sales dropped, with fans realising that they weren't rare, but just mass-produced duplicates. Shops were full of stock, but with this strategy no longer working, stock just sat still, with Marvel still producing more. Marvel collapsed from the mistake of selling rarity to millions. This collapse led to the closure of hundreds of comic book stores, the failure of major distributors, and a significant decline in their stock value. All Marvel was left with were warehouses filled with unwanted comics and a $1 million debt. On December 27, 1996, Marvel filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. This meant Marvel could continue operating, but its activities were temporarily paused while it figured out a route to escape bankruptcy. This created a legal battle over the control of the company between the shared owners at the time, including Ron Perelman, Carl Icahn, and the Toy Biz leadership. 2 years later in 1998, Marvel merged with Toy Biz, ending their years of bankruptcy, also resulting in Ron Perelman losing his place as the owner of Marvel. This allowed Marvel to try a new route and avoid meeting their past fate of failure again. Marvel wanted to take their characters to the big screen, but because they only just got back on their feet, they could not afford this expense. The only valuable assets they owned were their characters. Marvel decided to take a risk, selling many of its characters' film rights to different studios. This meant that the film studios got to develop characters from Marvel on the big screen with full creative control and the opportunities to create sequels and spin-offs. One of the first companies Marvel went to was Sony, where they were offered the film rights for nearly all of Marvel's characters for only $25 million. Sony abruptly denied this, still wanting just Spider-Man, telling Marvel, "Nobody gives a shit about the other Marvel characters." Sony and Marvel ended up tying a deal where they brought the film rights for $7 million. From 2002 to 2007, Sony produced a trilogy of Spider-Man films. They grossed over $2.5 billion worldwide, turning what was once a failed comic into a global blockbuster. This showed Marvel's idea of taking them from the comics to the screen was correct, but they had to take a risk of selling the characters and leaving it in others' hands for it to happen. Other studios such as Fox, Universal, and New Line Cinema brought characters' screen rights separately from Marvel. Key films from these franchises include The X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Blade. These films all included mainstream Marvel comic characters, but some films struggled to portray the epic stories fans had once read before.
Say that again?
In the early 2000s, Marvel was still struggling financially. All their big characters were licensed out to other studios, earning them not that much money. Marvel itself was just seen as a comic book company selling their rights. Marvel realised their mistake of licensing their characters as they lost out on profit. Kevin Feige, who was a producer at the time, pitched a shared universe inspired by how comic books crossed over characters in storylines and compared it to the financial successes of franchises like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. Marvel realized they didn't just need to license their characters, and that they could finance their own and keep all the profit. Marvel was still financially limited, so they came up with a plan to produce films with characters that were licensed elsewhere. From this pitch, Marvel Studios was created and planned to produce Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr. The character was not previously licensed out and was not a mainstream hero at the time, so casting this controversial actor was a gamble for them. Robert Downey Jr. had a history of legal troubles with multiple arrests between the 90s and 2000s. Hollywood saw him as unreliable. Marvel's choice of casting was viewed badly by the public pre-release of the film. Marvel knew this film had to be a success as they tied in references to future films and post-credit scenes. Marvel knew this film had to be a success as they tied in references to future films and post-credit scenes as blueprints for this universe. Marvel already had the Avengers in mind when producing the film, with the films The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America planned to be released following Iron Man. When Iron Man hit theaters, Marvel knew it would be a success, and they were correct. With a domestic opening of $98 million, grossing approximately $585 million worldwide, this was a great comeback for Marvel, positively kick-starting their project. The film included a cameo appearance from Marvel's primary creative leader, Stan Lee, who created many characters for Marvel Comics. They also had a post-credit scene where Nick Fury, played by Samuel Jackson, recruits Iron Man in suspense for the upcoming Avengers film. The post-credit scene was a hint at the MCU itself, as he tells Stark, "You've become part of a bigger universe." Following Iron Man's success, Kevin Feige was promoted from president of production. Following Iron Man's success, Kevin Feige was promoted from president of production to the president of Marvel Studios. This was highly deserved, as he pitched the idea of this shared universe of heroes. The following Marvel films all did well, building off of Iron Man's success, and the suspense increased more and more, with films teasing one another and linking characters. For example, Tony Stark's appearance in The Incredible Hulk. Although Marvel went this route with their own licensed characters, they were not allowed to touch on their popular characters, which were licensed to other studios, which Marvel fans wanted to see in the universe. After Universal's deal for The Incredible Hulk to be made, rights reverted back to Universal, but an agreement was made that the Hulk could appear but only as a cameo part rather than a standalone film. Prior to the Avengers, Disney had bought Marvel for $4 billion, which was a great investment seeing how well the universe had gone. The new ownership would help the MCU be funded and access other characters in the future. The Avengers was a hit due to the hype around the team in the comics, but the Marvel Universe built up. The Avengers was a hit due to the hype around the team in the comics, but the Marvel Universe build-up to the film helped fans see the characters develop and return to their big screens. The main faces in Marvel had changed from Wolverine, Spider-Man, and the Hulk to Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. A big change in the early MCU was recasting actors like Hulk and War Machine. These were due to disagreements on different aspects when creating the films. This was the first controversial change Marvel made which fans disagree on to this day. With fans still disagreeing on it to this day. Years later in 2015, Marvel could feel the missing aspect of their universe being Years later in 2015, Marvel could feel the missing aspect of their universe being the friendly neighborhood wall crawler. Spider-Man and his surrounding heroes were owned by Sony. Spider-Man and his surrounding characters were owned by Sony, and Marvel wanted to buy them back. Marvel offered to buy Spider-Man, but Sony said no, seeing as it had made them millions. Marvel wanted to introduce him with a new actor rather than trying to carry on one of the previous stories, but Sony was not willing to budge. In 2016, Marvel released the Captain America Civil War final trailer, where it was revealed that Spider-Man had worked his way into the MCU. Marvel struck a deal where Sony gets to keep the screen rights, but the MCU can use the character on screen alongside the Avengers and other heroes, temporarily. Marvel struck a deal where Sony gets to keep the screen rights, but Marvel can temporarily use the character on screen alongside the Avengers and other heroes. When Sony brought Spider-Man, they didn't just buy the character, but also all the villains and other Spider people related to him. So now this deal was made, Marvel could only use Spider-Man within Sony's limits, as they planned to make films themselves. Marvel Studios went on to make Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home, with him also appearing in films like Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Sony had already made their own Venom films, with the first one releasing in 2018. With other films like Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web to follow. It seems like Sony was building their own Spider-Man universe, even though they had given the rights over to Marvel in a deal. In early 2021, Spider-Man 3 was announced. Fans speculated whether the two Spider-Men In early 2021, the third film for Tom Holland's Spider-Man trilogy, Spider-Man No Way Home, was announced. Fans speculated whether the previous two Spider-Men would return to fight alongside each other on the big screen. The hype was building up day by day, with thousands of videos being made on the film, even with little to no information about it. It was then announced that Sony had taken back the rights to Spider-Man. Fans were not pleased by this, as it meant the trilogy of the Spider-Man films would not be complete, and seemed selfish by a big corporation to just retract the character randomly. Sony's Spider-Man villain films had not done well at the time. Sony's Spider-Man universe films had not done well at the time, seeing as they didn't even have a Spider-Man themselves, so they planned to take Tom Holland's Spider-Man and use him within their own universe. People started protesting online as no one wanted to see Tom Holland interact with these characters. In the post-credit scene for Morbius, we can see Sony decided to take they wanted to go this route through the Morbius post-credit scene, where we see the MCU's Vulture appear in the Sony universe. This made no sense for the MCU's storyline. Eventually, Sony and Marvel struck another deal, bringing him back into the MCU for the foreseeable future. This shows how one move by Marvel back in the 90s, selling off their characters, has benefited them massively, but does still affect them to this day. Spider-Man No Way Home Spider-Man No Way Home was very successful in the cinemas, being one of the most viewed films of all time. Spider-Man No Way Home did really successful in the theatres and is classed as one of the biggest films of all time. Marvel is still buying back characters from studios. In recent times, Marvel's still buying back characters from studios, including Disney buying Fox, meaning Marvel gets the right to the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. Disney buying the characters means they are allowed to use their past films. Disney buying the characters means they are allowed to use their past film stories rather than writing new ones, so the characters people know and love aren't thrown away. All of these rights being under one company means that they can expand the universe more than they have ever wanted to before, and with Avengers Doomsday approaching, this is majorly beneficial for them, as they can include the X-Men and their newly developed Fantastic Four team. Marvel's risky play in the past, which tore their cinematic rights apart, has now come full circle with all of their heroes being able to join one another on the big screen.